Part 1. The Great Pyramid is the chief of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. It is the only one of the 7 which has survived the ravages of time. For 41 centuries that mighty monument has kept silent watch over the delta of the Nile. Its majestic appearance commands the respect of all who visit Egypt. A veil of mystery seems always to have shrouded the Great Pyramid from the days of its erection. The builders themselves did not appear to understand the purpose of the work they were engaged upon. Even the architect, if we are to believe the records of history, directed operations under sealed orders from a higher authority. As the result of this general lack of knowledge, many theories have been advocated to account for the existence of the Great Pyramid, some reasonable and some fanciful. The early Egyptians evidently regarded the structure as a great sepulchre, for in most of their later-built pyramids, the familiar sarcophagi have been discovered. So recently as 1837, Colonel Howard Weiss found mummies in a few of these stone coffins. The tumic theory of the Great Pyramid has thus naturally received most favor. But however true it may be that some, probably all, of the other pyramids were intended to serve as tombs, careful modern investigation has demonstrated that the Great Pyramid, at all events, was not erected for this purpose. Owing principally to the learned researches of Professor C. Piazzi Smythe, Astronomer Royal for Scotland, it is fully recognized that the Great Pyramid contains numerous scientific truths. It is not generally known that this ancient monument is referred to in the Bible. Few realize that the scriptural plan of salvation is corroborated by the symbolism of the building. Our claim is that the Great Pyramid, while constructed by man, is, like the Bible, of divine origin. Like the tabernacle in the wilderness and the temple in Jerusalem, we believe that the Great Pyramid was designed for the purpose of testifying to the truth of God's infinite justice, power, love, and wisdom. The more complete our knowledge of the plan of salvation becomes, the more our appreciation of the Great Pyramid increases. Regarding the location of the Great Pyramid, it is one of a group of 9, known as the 9 Pyramids of Giza. The rocky plateau of Giza lies about 10 miles to the west of the modern city of Cairo. The Great Pyramid is the most northern of the group. The second pyramid, although very large, is nevertheless much smaller than the Great Pyramid. Yet from some viewpoints it appears to be the higher of the two. It stands on a higher level of rock, and a large area of the summit is still covered with the original casing. Quite 30 feet of the summit of the Great Pyramid is missing. The third pyramid is much smaller than its 2 giant neighbors, but although comparatively little, it is considered to have been very expensive to build, owing to the fact that granite was used to cover a large area of its 4 sides. It is not possible to accurately judge of the true sizes of the Giza pyramids by simply looking at them. When viewed from the south, the third pyramid and the Great Pyramid appear to be the same height. The perspective gives a false impression. That great dumb idol, the Sphinx, is generally depicted in such a way as to make it appear almost as huge as the Great Pyramid. Here again the perspective gives a false impression. Most pictures are taken close up to the Sphinx, and thus its relative proportion is unduly magnified. When we view these 2 monuments from a distance, however, the contrast in size is more apparent. By this method of comparison one can form a truer conception of the immense bulk of the Great Pyramid, for the Sphinx is itself very large. Chambers have not yet been found inside the Sphinx. Colonel Howard Weiss, at much expense, pierced its huge body with a boring rod in the hope of discovering chambers, but without success. Since his day, no competent investigator has examined this monument. Nothing of value has been learned from it. The Sphinx was carved in the rock centuries after the Great Pyramid was built. We believe that the Great Pyramid is referred to in the Bible. In Isaiah chapter 19, verses 19 and 20, we read, "In that day there is an altar to Jehovah in the midst of the land of Egypt, even a pillar at the border thereof to Jehovah, and it shall be for a sign and witness to Jehovah of hosts in the land of Egypt." This utterance of the prophet fully applies to the Great Pyramid. The Great Pyramid is the hub or geometric center of Egypt's curved shoreline. It thus may be said to stand in the midst of the land. Yet it is also at the border thereof, for it is situated at the edge of the desert, on the southern limit of the cultivated land of Lower Egypt. Geographically, the Great Pyramid stands in the center of the land surface of the earth. The area of land north and south, and also east and west of the building are equal. The ancient Greeks claimed that their city Athens marked the center of the earth, but with our better knowledge of geography, we find that the facts really favor the Great Pyramid with this honor. Professor Smythe discovered that the exact dimensions of the pyramid bear a proportionate ratio to the size of the earth and to the solar system. The pyramid cubit is the even 10 millionth part of half the Earth's polar axis. This is much more scientific than the unit of the modern French metric system, which is based upon the even 10 millionth part of the curved surface line from the North Pole to the equator. The pyramid inch is the 25th part of a cubit. Pyramid inches measured along the building's passageways represent years in the scrolls of history. We now direct attention to the fact that, in the imagery of the Bible, the pyramidal structure is used to illustrate the exalted preeminence of our Lord Jesus Christ. Jesus himself alluded to this when he said, "Did ye never read in the Scriptures, the stone which the builders rejected, the same has become the head of the corner? This is the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes." Matthew 21, verse 42. The figurative language of Jesus can properly apply only to a pyramid, for in this type of building we find one cornerstone which is distinctive as the cornerstone, the head of the corner. There are 38 pyramids in Egypt, most of which are now merely ruinous mounds. None of the other pyramids show such fine workmanship as the Great Pyramid. It is the Great Pyramid and not the others which was erected under God's supervision. The numerous other pyramids are entirely ignored by the Scriptures. The Great Pyramid is referred to in the Bible, though in hidden language. In Job chapter 38, verses 4 through 7, we read, "Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare if thou hast understanding. Who hath laid the measures thereof, if thou knowest? Or who hath stretched the line upon it? Whereupon are the sockets thereof made to sink? Or who laid the cornerstone thereof, when the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy?" Notice how the Lord speaks to Job about foundation sockets made to sink. When we examine the foundations of the Great Pyramid, we find that the stones at the 4 base corners were made to sink into corresponding sockets in the rock. None of the other pyramids throughout Egypt possess such socket foundations. Thus, although the passage in Job speaks of the earth, it is also referring to the Great Pyramid. Professor Smythe has pointed out that there are scientific connections between the size of the earth and the dimensions of the Great Pyramid. It is generally agreed by pyramid students that the Great Pyramid was the first to be built. This explains why none of the other pyramids possesses an upper system of passages. History shows that the builders of the other pyramids were unaware of the ascending passages and chambers constructed high up in the masonry of their great model. And for no less than 3,000 years, the upper interior arrangement of the Great Pyramid was a profound secret. The second pyramid was built immediately after the Great Pyramid. Its passage system is quite unlike that of the Great Pyramid. It has 2 entrance passages and only 2 chambers, all cut out in the rock for the most part. The passage system of the third pyramid, which was built soon after the second pyramid, is arranged in a totally different style, without any attempt at symmetry. It has 3 chambers, 2 of which were used as tombs. The large ornamental stone coffin which Colonel Howard Vyse found in the third pyramid was lost at sea during transit to Britain. As with the second and third pyramids of Giza, so with all the other pyramids of Egypt, their internal arrangements do not display any definite design. They are apparently without meaning. The passageways and chambers of these other pyramids also are mostly hewn in the rock. In these respects, therefore, the Great Pyramid stands unrivaled. Its descending passage is by far the longest of any, measuring nearly 350 feet. Its large subterranean chamber lies 100 feet vertically below the baseline. The whole internal arrangement of the Great Pyramid is very symmetrical, highly scientific, and full of significance. As we have mentioned, the upper system of the Great Pyramid was a profound secret for 3,000 years. It was discovered by accident. It is recorded that in the year 820 A.D., a caliph of Baghdad, Al-Mamun by name, journeyed to Egypt with a company of men, intent on plundering the treasure supposed to be hidden in the pyramid. At that time, the four sides of the building were encased with beautiful smooth casing stones. All of these casing stones have long since been stripped off by the Arabs to build houses. The entrance of the low, narrow descending passage was then closed by a stone door. There is no door now, but we know there was one originally because the ancient geographer Strabo, who lived in the 1st century before Christ, saw it and wrote about it. The stone door was the same size as many of the casing stones, and hence very difficult to detect. In passing, we point out that the few casing stones which now remain at the northern base of the monument serve the useful purpose of indicating the exact ancient height of the pyramid. The angle of their outer face, which is clearly defined, proves that the Great Pyramid is endowed with many wonderful scientific features. In its present dilapidated condition, the entrance of the Great Pyramid can easily be discerned even from a distance, but as we have said, in the days of Caliph al-Ma'mun, it was extremely difficult to locate. Casing stones covered all the pyramid at that time, and the stone door which closed the entrance looking like another casing stone. The Caliph seems to have known that the door was situated somewhere near the central line of the northern flank, but it is evident that he did not know of its exact position. Not being able to find the entrance, the Caliph directed his men to force a passage into the building. The large, dark outer opening of this forced passage is very conspicuous. It lies nearly midway between the ground and the true entrance above, but several feet further to the west. After working their way inward for about 120 feet without making any hopeful discovery, the men were nearly giving up their labor in despair, when one day they heard a noise. It sounded as if some heavy object had fallen inside the building. They immediately worked with renewed energy in the direction of the noise, and soon broke into the descending passage. It was a happy chance, for they did not know they were working so near the building's entrance passage. There, lying on the floor of the descending passage, they saw an angular-shaped stone. On examining the roof, they observed an opening from which apparently the stone had fallen, thus causing the noise. This stone had been fitted in even with the general line of the roof of the descending passage, and looked like the other roof stones. It had therefore effectually concealed the lower opening of the first ascending passage. Thus all the earlier explorers in the centuries before the Caliph, although they apparently possessed knowledge of the swinging stone door of the outside entrance, and were therefore able to make their way down the descending passage to the subterranean chamber, were nevertheless ignorant of the ascending passages and upper chambers. But the Caliph found it impossible to go up this newly discovered ascending passage. Immediately behind the dislodged roof stone is a series of 3 granite stones which still block the way. They are known collectively as the Granite Plug. Seeing that the granite plug is wedged into its place and cannot be taken out, the Caliph instructed his men to force a passage round it through the soft limestone. There is now, therefore, a large cavity round the west side of the obstructing granite plug. By taking advantage of this cavity, access is now gained to the first ascending passage. We can picture to ourselves the expectation of the Caliph's men when, on reaching the passage above, they made their way up its steep and slippery floor and began an eager exploration of the dark, mysterious passages and chambers, sealed up 3,000 years before by the ancient builders and now visited for the first time. Surely, they would think, great hoards of wealth must lie somewhere in this wonderful place. But their expectations were doomed to disappointment. The pyramid's treasures are not of the kind to appeal to Arabian adventurers. They are the treasures of wisdom and knowledge.